All right, the first episode of Blockheads. I'm here today. I'm Eystein Hansen, one of the staking pool operators of the Cardano ecosystem. We have also today with us Ken-Erik. Ken-Erik could not be here today, but NIDO is here with us. And we have the honor of having Frederik Gregaard from Cardano Foundation here. So awesome he's taking his time to come here to talk with the community like this. Maybe we should start with like a short round about each other. So I will introduce myself, and then maybe NIDO, and then Frederik can take a turn. So for those of you who don't know me, I've been in the ecosystem since 2018, ran a staking pool since ITN, and basically anything related to Cardano, my heart beats for it. I truly care about this community. So if you want to check out my pool, it's Ada Nord Pool, ANP. That's my introduction. NIDO.
Hi, I'm NIDO. I'm a music producer from Norway. I've been in blockchain since 21 and chose Cardano for my musical adventures here, and been here in the community since, growing the NFT or music ecosystem, and release my music as NFTs on Cardano. So you can check out me as well with officialnido.com if you want.
Frederik, you want to tell a bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Frederik Gregaard, and I'm the CEO of the Cardano Foundation, which is one of the, let's call it, bootstrapping entities of the Cardano protocol. And we are a Swiss nonprofit foundation, which is a little bit different than many other blockchain foundations. And I think actually that's a pretty good thing, because it allows us to take some risk, and it allows us to take some liability in some other places than other blockchain foundations. And it allows us to move not just the ecosystem, but also to really put a razor hard focus on operational resilience. So specifically, that's why I like stake pool operators a lot, like what we have on the call here today. But we're also focusing on the promotion of the protocol, including adoption. So I think music is a good theme here. And last but not least, education. We really see that education for regulators, for policymakers, for solution designers, and the average person who's looking into figuring out what blockchain actually is and what it isn't, they don't have a lot of options today. It's really hard to figure out what a blockchain can do and can't do. So that's the three themes we are focusing on this year.
Amazing. Before we start with a round of some questions, we can debate a bit. I like to start with what are the passions outside of Cardano, because sometimes we can relate that when we discuss on Cardano as well. So I would like to have a round on that. And for myself, it's really this passion for RealFi, that we were able to give banking possibilities to the bankless, and to connect the unconnected, all of these things. That's so meaningful to me. So that's one of my passions outside of that. And apart from that, I love books, as you might guess. And I'm a role-playing geek. That's why a lot of books are about that. But that's my passions outside of Cardano. NIDO, you want to tell a bit also your passions outside?
You could do some of mine. It's music, of course. Beside of not so much the technical side of blockchain, but what blockchains can do. And I'm a forest guy, so I like to be in the forest, because I'm like Frederik, I live in Scandinavia. Like I said, I'm from Norway. So and my family, of course, it's a huge passion.
That explains your Twitters on chopping wood. Now I know.
Yeah.
Okay. How about you, Frederik?
Yeah, it's really hard for me, because a lot of my passions is Cardano, right? So a lot of the things I do, I try to bring into Cardano, I try to move with Cardano. But if I should say something which is completely unrelated to Cardano, I'm actually going this weekend to recertify in the mountain search and rescue. So every year I actually do that, and that basically entails that helping people on the mountain or in the forest, if they get hurt, to patch them up and get them to second level service, but also to give back something to the community around the large forest and the large mountains is something I'm quite passionate about. and it also allows me to have two small kids. One is 5 and one is 7, and they're very adventurous. So it helps a bit when they climb up a big tree. That I know actually if something happens, I'm sort of I'm up onto the latest first aid requirements to help them.
That's amazing. I do in the army like a medical course every year, so I really respect that. That's really cool detail to hear about you, Frederik. Okay, so that what you said about the passion about Cardano, that's something that's a large part of your life. This is something that vibes well with me. Like, I have had the chance to meet some of the developers in Cardano now, and even after like a 12-hour grueling work session, the moment we start to go drink a beer, what do they talk about? Cardano. So you can really tell the passion is there. So that really vibes with me, and it's not just words. I know this is true things. Like, the people working on Cardano really care about the protocol. So nice to hear that. Let's start to move on to some more questions and try to see if we can get some discussion going. The first one, I really like this question by NIDO. It's like a broad one, but what is, in your mind, the secret sauce that makes the Cardano community as thriving and unique as it is? Like, why is it so passionate, the Cardano community? Why do you think that's the case? Maybe we should start with you, Frederik.
Yeah, I think throughout most of human history, humans was preyed upon by animals. So despite being sort of intelligent and possessing some kind of physical advantages, humans were relatively small and vulnerable to large predators. So, however, when humans united and worked together, they became an unstoppable force. And this is sort of evidenced by the fact that humans eventually became the dominant species on the planet, or at least until rats takes over or something like that, right? And when you look into public blockchains are only as strong as the community that supports them.
Yeah.
A blockchain is a distributed ledger that records transactions and maintains the integrity of the network, right? So that's a very technical thing. So a lot of people think that the strength of a blockchain is how good the technology stack is. And I kind of disagree with that. I think it's very important with a very good technology stack. It needs to be, fit for purpose. It needs to be, resilient. It needs to be reliable and so on. But a lot of these tech stacks are open source, and they're covered by open source licensing. That means that we have the ability, if we see a feature we like somewhere else or an architecture we like somewhere else, it's not just that we have the ability to get inspired by that, but we're also giving back to other projects. So some of the largest projects in the world are actually running Cardano ideas, or running Cardano research, or running Cardano implementations as a part of their core stack. And we also get inspiration. So we just had a workshop with the guys over at Algorand around sidechains, right? So I think, it's not really the technology, it's really the community. So, and I think that's what people need to understand. And when you look into the community of Cardano, the Cardano community is quite different than many other blockchains. And that's also why I'm with Cardano. And that's very much united around a purpose. And that purpose is a long, very large purpose around the willingness to change status quo. We do not like what we see when we go more than a mile away from our house or from our flat. We see some things in society where we feel that we have the ability, but also the opportunity through blockchain to create a better world. And when I look into some other blockchains, they're very much around how do I do an AMM, and how do I set certain things up so I get, extremely rich. So that's about you. That's about how you use information asymmetry. And that's okay also to have that on a public blockchain. I don't disagree with that. But what I think is unique about Cardano is that we have this overarching long vision about that status quo is unacceptable. And we are willing to go beyond that 1 kilometer around our house and put some effort into, an opportunity of changing the world as we know it by using a technology which is the public blockchain called Cardano.
That's a really good answer. I really like that, Frederik. I like the analogy of like this. You have to run a bit outside of your comfort zone and to see the problems around you. And for me, that is something that makes the Cardano community special. It's like we are willing to do the marathon. Like now we have this long road ahead with governance. And it's not going to be easy, but people are willing to roll up their sleeves and really work on this. And We do it because we want to make something that can be used by others. It's not just about Cardano, it's about the whole cryptocurrency ecosystem. So yeah, that for me is part of the secret sauce, is the community's willingness to not just look at the short-term gains, but to really work towards common goals. That's why part of it. But we also have this really thriving and really great social community around. It's not just about the technical parts. I'm an SPO, staking pool operator, but we also have this wonderful music scene, this art scene, and I'm also curious then about NIDO. What's your perspective on this? Like, what's the secret sauce? Why does it bloom so much, this community?
Well, I had some thoughts in the car just from work now, and I think one of the things that makes our community so special is from my perspective, is so many have an elevated technical mindset and maturity to what the blockchain can do. Like Frederik said, we would think some miles beyond our house, and yeah, there's the shared vision of having a better world and improving the systems that we see all around us. And yeah, I think our community is a little bit more matured than the others. We have not the short-term gains mindset, but a little more, yeah, caring for each other. We started so small, so many people know each other. It's not just you don't walk around in New York like and don't know anyone. You're in Oslo and you recognize people around you, and I think that helps to build the community that we see lift the space.
It certainly does, and I can I know so many in the community that reach out to each other, and every Friday I put on your NIDO, your song, the Cardano, so keep me in a good mood. So it's a wonderful community. But let's not discredit other communities, and that's also the cool part of it. It's like, I think we're a very open community, so if anyone watches this and is from another community, just check out Cardano. We're a welcome family. You can ask questions. You're not going to be looked down upon. So yeah, with that question, that's the broad question about the community. Let's try and do a more general about how do you see the blockchain technology evolve the next 5 to 10 years? And where does Cardano fit into this vision? Because one thing is the social system, what we have now in the community, but how is this going to evolve for the next 5 to 10 years? Does anyone want to start, or should I give it a go? Okay, I can do a quick one from me. What I hope to see in the next 5 to 10 years is like we will probably have adopted some AI research, and we will have actually implemented this RealFi, and we will have had a community that did not fracture during this governance period. We will have worked together in an open debate and allow different types of communities to form. I think we're not going to see one Cardano community. We're going to see like multiple Cardano communities across the world going forward. So that's my like big thinking about the future. I'm curious about your opinion on this topic. Frederik, you want to give it a go?
Yeah, I said it on quite a few podcasts, and I think I will re-emphasize it here, right? I think you're basically going to see two types of companies in the future. You're going to see the companies who is going to build on blockchain. You might not see the blockchain, but you will interact with the features and the consequences of blockchain while you interact with these companies. And then there's going to be companies who do not build on blockchain. And I think if it's 5 or 10 years, I don't know, but over time, the people on the companies who build on blockchain will win every single time. And why is that? Well, it's something to do with accountability and transparency and immutability. I think, unfortunately, we are living in a world today where it's extremely hard if you buy some shares, for instance, right? It's extremely hard to understand what you get exposure to. like most multinational corporations, you don't even know what the product or what the cap table is, and all decisions are made by pension funds who owns the majority. The board decisions are sort of, taken before you move into the general assembly, right? So I mean, there's a complete decoupling basically from, let's say, bringing people together and being able to trust each other, and what we actually would like to do as human species, right? Because as human species, we're made to work together. We only scale very well when we can specialize in what we do, right? And I think the whole system we have around us is crumbling. We see this institutional trust gap is getting bigger and bigger, and COVID kind of accelerated that with a decade, right? So what we will see in Cardano more specifically is we will see interoperability, so chain interoperability, both with side chains and other blockchains and other systems like SAP or large ERP systems and stuff like that. We would also see that the governance is in effect in such a way that we have a good way to enact a hard fork combinator event who allows the blockchain to upgrade to fit the needs of the consumer, which is really dangerous, because when you look at the difference between Bitcoin and Cardano, Bitcoin is one use case. It started out with a dream of more than that, but it ended up with one use case, right? And it's extremely hard to get a new code change or a feature request into that stack because of the bicameral model and the value of the storage of value which is on the Bitcoin. Cardano is made differently. It's made to change as society changes and as the needs changes, right? So I think the big trick here is, how do we enable as many use cases as possible across change while still being extremely stable, reliable, and built upon principles where you can really, trust that the blockchain keeps running and keeps producing blocks and is not just, being taken over by a bad actor. If I look into the mirror and say, okay, what's sort of my biggest worry? My biggest worry is not so much on the long time scale, not short term, but on the long time scale, my biggest worry is the Q date. So the Q date is something that keeps me up at night, because this sort of, this changes the whole premises of how we work in the digital space today. And I think Cardano is, and the outskirts, the architecture is built towards this, but we still need to have a roadmap which can execute good protection against for the system around that.
So for the viewers, Q date, is this about the quantum resistance or?
Yeah, exactly. Sorry about that. So this is it's really about, I mean, theoretically, is it possible to get a quantum computer up running? A couple of years ago, we all thought, okay, theoretically it works, but we now see a lot of dollars are being sunk into these projects. We see the first couple of let's say proof of concepts running, maybe with about 100 qubits or 500 qubits, right? So it's still a sort of, why should we care, right? But the notion of how quantum computing works is going to, it's going to break the internet as we know it. And blockchain lives on the internet, and blockchain lives with public cryptography, right? And I think, Cardano's on the forefront. We've done a lot of research around this. But we do need to execute it, meaning that we need to really look a little bit longer term and not just look at CK snarks and some of those things. We also need to look at those large attack vectors and start thinking about how do we fund that, how do we elect the right solution, and how do we ensure that the community also understand those kind of choices we need to do today to be a viable solution for everybody around the world, wherever you are, also in the next 50 years.
I want to touch on that topic a bit before NIDO, we can segue to you, but that brings me to the education part of Cardano Foundation and how important it is, because this is something we debated during the governance sessions as well. Like, how do we make sure the community has experts that we can do this type of changes? Because this will now be in the hands of the community. And how do we know, like, what will be the security concerns that we need to think really through in the next couple of years? So I think I love that you highlighted this, and this is something I invite the viewers of this show to also give us some feedback on this. What's your opinion? Because this is a very important topic going forward. But with that said, NIDO, with all of this, I would think one part of this is going to be that we will have multiple communities. Like, how else would we be able to get side chains in and all these different tribes or different communities together? And I think part of that is like how we exchange culture and how we do NFTs, how we do music. Do you have any like thinking yourself about how do you see the more social and musical aspects of this move into the next 5 to 10 years? And for example, this is about trust. Like, how is it to be a musician, to have trusted in the corporations, and how does this compare with releasing music on Cardano, for example?
Well, I agree with the expanding, like you said, with the community that's expanding. It's gonna be sort of like I think it's gonna be sort of like in a NFT project, that some projects have, like the Disco Solaris that I have, and some others that been emerging now, that you have sub communities within the communities with and I think that's going to happen as well as Cardano is going more mainstream, that each it's going to be a lot of sub communities, with the common goal, of course, but based on different things. Like in the music community, that's already a sub community on the Cardano,
Disco
in the broader
Solaris.
community,
Yeah.
and like we have Project Nuum, with when we're talking about how blockchain is going to be, and Cardano is going to be in the next 5-10 years. I don't think we're going to know it's there, and I like to use Project Nuum like an example there, because they're going to eventually end up with an app, like Spotify, that you're going to use, and you're not going to know that it's on any blockchain, but it's going to utilize Cardano. And it's same with Book.io. And we recently had Newcast that's done, that's going to be video streaming, I think. And I think Frederik did Twitter space with them.
Cool.
And it's we're not going to know it's there, and I'm more on the community side and not on the financial side. Sure, we're going to have financial apps and stuff that people are going to know, and that's on the blockchain. But from the community side and the end user side, it's going to be hidden, I think.
I really agree with that, and I think the main job is to facilitate frameworks where everything is like seamless for the end user. Like you don't know it's there, so that's going to be the job for the builders.
And as I said, with transparency and companies, on the Cardano Summit, I had some talks after a few beers with with one of the community members, and we sort of like had a great idea together, that blockchain really enables, like if you envision a concert from an artist, like that's where I'm at. You can set things up with smart contracts that can enable just a push of a button, that can end up each person involved getting paid. You can set up so much with a smart contract on the blockchain that makes it trustless. You don't have to trust anyone. You don't have to be a part of a company to be able to join, or
no more black market tickets. It will be NFTs you trade, for example.
That too with the what's that called again? The Norwegian guys making the ticketing system.
All right. We had them on the summit. I will drop a link on that after this. Centurify.
Yeah. And they're interoperable. They're both doing on Ethereum and Cardano, and you're not going to even know which one you're on, and that's the future.
Okay, Frederik, did you have anything more you want to add before we move on to the next topic, or you're good?
I think that maybe one point which people underestimate the importance of, and that is that when you say that things has to be smooth, it has to be easy to go through this, right? So you're on board on an app and you don't have any kind of hiccups. You don't need to change platforms and stuff like that. I see a big problem with that. And the big problem is that these user experiences, when it comes really, really smooth, they tend to be owned by one giant corporation. And we have this trade-off we're doing today, where when things becomes very easy and you get a really like instant gratification, you log on with single signature, right? And you get this huge experience and you click 2 buttons and, food arrive at your doorstep and, 20 minutes later you take an Uber and stuff like that, right? I'm not so certain that you will be able to do things so smooth on a blockchain in the next 5 to 10 years time. And the reason for that is the architecture. So there's a huge difference between creating a user experience in a centralized environment where you control everything, and then doing that in a decentralized environment where you're putting a focus on the distributed system as such. And therefore, I think it's important that we teach people about this trade-off, because a lot of people don't understand what they sacrifice when they take the convenient way onto Facebook or TikTok or onto eBay today. So there's a trade-off here where I think we need to make people a little bit more aware of what it means to own your own data and what it means to have your own identity and what it means to actually, not to mention somebody special, right? But there's also a trade-off if you use Brave browser, for instance, right? And a lot of in the crypto community likes to use Brave browser, and then they complain about, there's a disadvantage compared to using Google Chrome. So I think, part of what we're at least going to try and do some focus on is also to kind of highlight this trade-off when we speak to both regulators, but also nation states, but also to the average Joe out there, so they understand the importance of liberty, because we are actually seeing a battle of liberty going on out there right now, and there is 2 very big differences. And I know for once where I want to be here, and I'm willing to log into a couple of more extra systems, and I'm willing to do a little bit of extra work and take a little bit more responsibility on my own soul and my own family to ensure that I have this optionality. And I think this is I just want to highlight that. I know it's a little bit the boring side of it, but it's really important.
Yeah, it is.
I think it's going to be so important now, because when we're doing governance, we will have to make hard choices. And sometimes we have to prioritize decentralization or security over easiness, for example, or function. And this that it's seamless, it should be how we interoperability between the chains. But we will still have to accept some hardship to protect our data privacy. This was actually one of the topics we had during the Oslo summit. So I can only add to that. We fully agree, and for the viewers, you can also check that out. We had a big session on DIDs, digital identifiers, and how we want to protect data privacy. So thank you for bringing up that, Frederik. Let's now move on from the more general to more about specifics about Cardano Foundation. Since you are here, Frederik, we have to use the chance to ask about that. So with this increase in interest and adoption of cryptocurrencies in the past few years, what is Cardano Foundation doing to ensure that the ecosystem remains accessible to people from all backgrounds and skill levels, not just the builders? I know it's quite a broad topic, so you can decide what your angle is to answering this, but I'm really curious about what you see now going forward is going to be important to help the general average person to interact with Cardano. How can Cardano Foundation contribute to this?
So I think the Cardano Foundation is different, and the Cardano ecosystem is different than many other blockchains. So the first thing you need to be aware of is that the Cardano Foundation doesn't sit on a massive pile of money, so sort of like a funding arm, and then there's a couple of people in a room in Switzerland, and we basically send money to the ones we like better than others. This is actually not a bad business model, and we've seen some blockchains really grow very fast in that. The Cardano community is already so decentralized that we have something very beautiful called Catalyst. And Catalyst operates, for better or for worse, as an innovation booster or bootstrapping mechanism around innovation. So I think what is really important to understand is that, Catalyst is our innovation arm for the community who has access to the decentralized treasury. And that's where you can, find new people to collaborate with. You can find new ideas. You can jump on other people's idea. You can form a company. You can join a proposal. And you can get funding to get you, off the ground and get you moving, huh? But Catalyst is also has been sort of the learning ropes around, voting and other things, and there is definitely some improvement to be made. So the way I think about it is that the Cardano Foundation, in essence, specifically around 2023, 2024, is betting on 6 things. And I know you're supposed to say only 3 because then people remember it and so on. But I would like to highlight 6 things. So if you only get those 6 things, what the Cardano Foundation do, I think you're really on a good path, right? And I won't mention them in priority. I'm just going to kind of on the top of my head, talk about them. The first thing is what you have to realize is that there is now hundreds of projects and thousands of people who live on Cardano, right? That basically means that mainnet support, operations, and monitoring is extremely important. So what we're focusing on right now is to ensure that it's not just one entity, but more entities who is building the capabilities and assuming some responsibility for critical functions to maintain, monitor, and support Cardano mainnet. Over time, we would like to see that we build more tools and different views which we can give to the stake pool operators, which already today operates and runs the Cardano mainnet. But there is a transition period there where we go from one entity to multiple entities to 3,000 anonymous, ambitious, passionate people who operates Cardano. So that part, the more adoption, the more success Cardano becomes, the more important that is. The second part is what we call Voltaire orchestration or governance. And I think for us, what's really important is that we did a big push last year around talking about the importance of open source software development and the importance about that wherever you are in the world, you need to be able to contribute to the code base so you can understand how your product or service you built, in this case, music, right? That you can rely on if you do music on Cardano or if you store royalties or intellectual property right or use smart contracts around that the Cardano blockchain also exists in 10 years' time, but also that you can have the features and functions you need to have as an artist and becoming a successful artist. So sort of the back end. So everything you don't want to do is managed by the blockchain, and you can be a creative soul on the front end, right? So this orchestration is very important for us, and that's what we're focusing a lot on in the community team. And and you saw that obviously also in our participation in the workshop last week in the USA, right? Then it's education and addressing the regulatory uncertainty. So the backbone for adoption in the value capture segment, so in the segment which is actually the interesting part, right? In blockchain is an infrastructure, but when you think about apps and development and operating models, that's where people get passionate in the general world, right? And there what we think about a lot is how do we launch an educational initiative which is free for everybody, which people can build applications on, where people can build dApps on top of, they can translate it to Norwegian or Swedish, or they can, populate that at universities. So you can go to Oslo University and say, you know what, today you teach people about public cryptography and Bitcoin. Here is a free curriculum of 3rd generation blockchains, which is verified and has ECT points, and also have the ability to do, certificates on top of, right? So this kind of, bringing the population up to speed about what a 3rd generation blockchain can do, but also talking about the elephant in the room, which is the utility tokens. A good blockchain has a cryptocurrency, but a cryptocurrency doesn't necessarily have a blockchain. So I think that's sort of the third out of my 6. Then come technical enablers. And this is probably where you guys have been, seeing some lack here and there, right? But what is really important is that we need to be able to bridge the real world to the blockchain. And here for some of your listeners, it gets a little bit technical, right? But what we think about is like DB Sync, Rosetta, the address tier stack, a blockchain explorer who's up all the time, which has a graphical representation of how the incentive structure of the blockchain is, but also where you can find your metadata. You can go in and type music songs, and you can see the intellectual property right. So those kind of tooling, which is not native blockchain, but connects the operating model of the world with the blockchain. That connective tissue needs to mature, and we're doing quite a lot of work there. And you will see some announcements coming out here in the next following months, and probably you can come on a testnet very soon if you want to, but not everybody, right? But yeah, so there's some really good stuff going there. But these technical enablers, they're very important. I think about it a bit as an orthogonal and self-contained services and APIs to support Cardano applications in an enterprise-grade way. That would sort of be the one-sentence pitch for it. Then the fifth, I know it's a lot to remember here, right? But the fifth is growth enablers. And there, the summit is a big thing for us, a place where we can bring the virtual community into a physical setting and allow people to explore use cases, solve problems, create businesses together, but also learn from each other, share knowledge, and also, we would, bootstrap some experts in there like we did on the SPO track last time, right? Where we, get, lawyers and auditors and, technical people in the room, right? And you can meet the developers and so on. So basically, this is a good way of boosting the ecosystem. And then, of course, the educational programs and marketing and so on. And then the last is is open source, right? I think many blockchains, they speak about open source, but they don't mean open source. What they talk about is public source, meaning, okay, you can read my code. But the real world don't care so much about reading your code. The real world care about economic sustainability and the ability, if you bet on an architecture you don't own and control, that you can be a part of the off-chain governance and contributing to that. So that this bet you're doing will support your business, your nation state, or whatever you're doing for the next 10 to 15 years, right? And I think there are open source and creating the fundamentals for that, including the SIP process, but also creating strong open source communities around certain projects, like Icon, which you saw coming out of the Cardano Foundation and some affiliations, right, and other things, is really crucial. And so that's the 6 sort of a little bit deeper pillars which we are focusing on in the Cardano Foundation to make happen, huh?
That's a lot, and it just shows like how much Cardano Foundation is doing. Some would say in the background, but I don't agree with that. I see that there's a lot of visible work, like the Icon infrastructure is really good, and I think going forward now with governance, trust is going to be a key thing. Like we have to show people that want to come to our community that this will be a stable community. This will be, you can rely on this background infrastructure will be there in 5 to 10 years and things will not change. You know what you get when you invest into it. And as you said, like public source versus open source, like one thing is to read the code, but another is to know that if you invest in this open source, you will be an ingrained part of the community with a voting and right and an ability also to know what will come. So roadmaps, I think, is going to be important for this as well. We need to show people going forward now what to expect. Anything you want to add, NIDO? This is such a huge topic, but Frederik really nailed it in his answer. So
yeah, and I really like the tooling part, like to make things more accessible to see for both me and anyone else. Like you mentioned with music NFTs, that you can see who owns the IP rights, and it's a long process before we might even touch on something standardized. But I'm glad to see the foundation also is working towards that.
The way we kind of think about the natural succession of these tooling, right? And obviously everything is different with different use cases, right? But the way we think about it is, first of all, we need a very, very stable database synchronization tool. Today, DB Sync is okay, but it certainly would, a little bit more speed and a little bit more uptime and a couple of other things, right? So So that's, you will see some news coming out very soon around that from the foundation, right? But I think a really good database synchronization tool is really like the foundation for a lot of things, because the blockchain is the strongest out there, right? And it really works, right? But you need this database synchronization tool. The next thing you need is verified credentials and DIDs. And there you actually need to work with standards, right? Because it's extremely important about the ability to understand who wrote what on the database and who has the rights to do so, right? This is really important in terms of nearly all use cases, and specifically around royalties and music, and getting that in a standardized way that it also ports over to other blockchains is simply critical. You don't need to go all the way to self-sovereign identity and Atala Prism 2.0. You need actually these DIDs and VCs to make that happen. And then the third thing you actually need is, we call it a metadata bus, right? But you need the ability to manage and orchestrate metadata, both dynamic and static metadata. Because one of the things which is so unique about Cardano compared to some of the earlier generations of blockchains is that with Cardano, you don't only have NFTs, and an NFT can be either a smart contract or a native asset. But if you use the native asset, you also have the ability to have dynamic metadata in a native asset, which means you're changing the complete technical architecture and the way you can actually think about exposing music. So it's not just about royalties, but it's also as a distribution platform, and it allows you to see the cash flows and the ownership rights and all the complexity in a complete different way, and very cheap compared to working with smart contracts from a security perspective as well. So I think these three things is really some things which are really looking forward to getting out there and getting on with as we go along into 2023.
Glad you mentioned it's about metadata. From my perspective, it's going to be very important for governance as well, because how else would a direct representative represent himself? Like, how would you communicate and do this in a transparent way on the blockchain? So I really appreciate that there's been some work done on metadata and databases. I like dbsync, but it takes like 2.5 days to resync it from start. So great to see some work there. But of course, nothing to claim dbsync works, but loving to see that we have more options on that as well.
And there are some good options. I mean, there's some community built options out there as well. I have to highlight that the community actually built some really good scrapers and do. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But what I'm talking about here is when you really start thinking about scale, what you also want to do is you actually want to have a phone number to call. So if you think about the electrical grid, so the Norway electricity system, right? They probably won't just go on an open software solution where there's no number to call. They would like to have some kind of an SLA or some kind of an agreement with somebody, right? And until somebody goes in there and takes that room, then the Cardano Foundation can take that and say, okay, we take the negative liability. So there is some financial liability connected to that. And then, when more companies come in, right, then hopefully one of these community built ones will step up and make a business out of it, right? But until we get to there, I think the Cardano Foundation can play a role in mending that gap there is. So it makes it easier to bet on blockchain and associated technologies.
Good point. And for those of you viewers who were not familiar, like when we mentioned Koyos, it's actually a community build with decentralized version of dbsync with its own query language. So basically, what Frederik is saying is slowly happening in the community. Slowly, we're building solutions that will allow for companies to just contact this deliverer of this product, and they can be responsible for all of the backend, and you as a company can just worry about the front end. So with that, should we move on to the next question maybe? We talked a lot about programming, databases, all these things, but before we leave this topic, maybe can you say a bit more about how community members that do not have programming skills, how are they able to contribute in the Cardano ecosystem? And is there some ways that the Cardano Foundation supports other activities other than the builders, if you can call it that?
So that was never the role of the Cardano Foundation, but we're taking a little bit of a role in there because it's needed. So I think the three avenues I would point to here, and it's a very crowded space, right? But the three avenues I would kind of point to here is that the first one is all things being good, we are still on track to the end of March to launch our educational program for the alpha testers. We have like 500 something, signed up, and they will get exposure to I think it's about 7 hours of video, where it takes you from no blockchain knowledge to okay blockchain knowledge. It's sort of it's solid, right? And there's all the underlying scripts. Depending on what the 500 people will play back to us, in terms of feedback, we would either build on top of that into module 2, which would be Cardano, and or we would rewrite that, and that would slow us down a bit, right? But for us, quality is very important. Imurco has something called the Imurco Academy, which has different arms, and we have about 80 people in the Cardano Foundation today, and 50% of the employees has been through that course now. So even the HR people and the accounting people has now graduated and can download the blockchain, and they can do GraphQL and so on. So it's hard not to know anything about technology and fall in love with Cardano at this stage. But there is a couple of avenues coming which will allow you to just get enough knowledge that you understand if it's a good use case on blockchain or not. And the good thing is that there's a lot of technical people, as you mentioned earlier, in the community. And I think the easiest way to find those is through Catalyst. In Catalyst, you really see people are, offering their technical expertise, and you can then direct message them there and so on. I think Twitter is way too fast. I think that many of the Discord channels are way too niche, right? But I think Catalyst really serves a good place there. And then I've also seen that the community team, they lift a lot of the hard work. So we have quite, often we have some people reaching out to us and saying, I have this great business idea. Can you point us in the right direction? Now, if you have some technical expertise and you have a good idea to integrate something, we do have an integration team in the Cardano Foundation. And what we frequently do is, if it fits the Cardano Foundation sort of vision and mission, we open a bespoke Telegram channel or Slack channel, which allows you to interact with an integration engineer, which will basically speed up your road into Cardano quite dramatically. But you can't go from zero knowledge. Then you really need to do something on yourself there, unfortunately. So I think that's and then of course Cardano Cube and the developer portal has something called showcases. Cardano Cube is have several hundred different community projects already, and the showcase portal has about 130 verified projects, and there you can get a lot of inspiration. So if you're thinking, I would like to think a little bit of gaming or music and so on, you can point yourself in through that, and you can see what other people are doing, and the community is really open. It has sort of in the past, it was sort of a little bit more like a cult, and people said it was very close. But my experience in the last sort of 18 months is that it's really opened up and embraced a lot of people from other protocols, whether that was Luna or whatever that is. That it really has embraced people, and a lot of the projects are super open. If you just write to them and say, can I be a part of this, or can I contribute, or stuff like that, and that's a really good segue also to get your hands dirty. So I think there's a few things you can do there.
Absolutely, and that's my personal experience as well. There's so many tutorials and education material available that you can get from this level 0 easily up to a level where you can judge if I can do a project on Cardano. It is possible. How about you, NIDO? Like, as an artist, when you join, how was your learning experience to know I would like to release a music project on Cardano? Like, did you have the available material? Did you have the people who you could reach out to? Or
Yeah, it was. I know nothing technical or have any expertise about writing anything in any script on Cardano. So I rely on tooling, and that's where NMaker comes in. Former NFT maker, and Patrick, what he's built is exceptional, and I've been using them ever since I've started in the space, and utilized their tooling all the way, because they make it really easy for non-technical persons to do something like this. And I've tried to educate some people on NMaker myself, because it's easier to learn to teach people on the tooling than on the blockchain itself, I think, for me at least.
That's a good point. Sometimes you don't need to know all of the details of how the blockchain runs. You just need to know the tooling and how it would affect your project. So that's a good point. And I love the shout out to NMaker. They're amazing community project. And so one last question for CF, and then we move over to governance. I'm just curious, you said there's quite a lot of people working for Cardano Foundation now. Like, how many of these have background in the Cardano ecosystem? And is this something you prioritize or give weight when you look for people applying for a job at Cardano Foundation? And the reason I ask about this is more like, what's the DNA of Cardano Foundation? Does it value that you have this knowledge of what was before and how to combine this with the future and combine this with technical knowledge? I guess it's a bit leading question, but Frederik, can you personally, I really love what Cardano Foundation is doing, so I would like to know myself, does Cardano Foundation prioritize or give some weight to having prior experience in the Cardano ecosystem?
It certainly does. It does, right? Because when we're doing a HR survey, I think this in the next 6 months to test a little bit the pulse as well, because when I arrived, there was about 30 something people in the Cardano Foundation, and they were very passionate and they were very driven, right? But there was not a clear strategy, and there was nearly no technical people, so nobody was actually able to read the code or understand the architecture and so on. And today, what we actually have, sort of 2.5 years later, is that we more than doubled the Cardano Foundation, right? And we've added a lot of technical resources, which means that we actually have people who can, read Haskell. We have people who understand tooling. But what we also did is we onboarded people who's been a part of the Cardano, community since inception. And some of those people has also, been a bit skeptical towards the Cardano Foundation and Emurgo and other of the entities, and say, what are they actually doing? And I think it's a sort of is a quality stamp that they've chosen to work for us. And I say specific, they've chosen to work for us and not the other way around, because they were already working for Cardano, the protocol, because they were spending their, all the, the free time on it, right? But now they've chosen to join the folds with us. So I think the short version is that, yes, you cannot work for the Cardano Foundation if you're not passionate about blockchain and you are not passionate about the purpose. Now, we do have a few functions, though, however, which is sort of very traditional. And those people, they can do a fantastic job for us every single day, and they don't need to necessarily eat, breathe, and sleep blockchain, right? Because, you just need certain things to report to the regulator and to your bookkeeping and accounting. But what I'm very proud of is, for instance, my accounting department. They are not happy about being an accounting department. So what they're doing actually is they're running a project where they're insourcing accounting. And now they are scheduling to put all our accounting events on the Cardano blockchain as financial events. Then they're going to export that to the auditor so we can do a balance sheet and an audit on that. And then they're going to basically report that back into the blockchain. So they are so motivated about blockchain that they all went through the Emurgo training course. They convinced me to hire, external counsel around that. And they're working with the engineering department to basically bring accounting on the blockchain. And I have a contact also in the HR department, and they're exploring right now, is there anything we can do to at least, use the blockchain just a little bit? And in HR, sort of a little bit hard, right? Because how the blockchain works and so on. But the whole notion that they're thinking that far is, I'm very proud of that. So I think that's sort of the DNA with us.
Thank you, Frederik. Before we move on, I want to say that as a person who have followed Cardano Foundation a long time, and I have been skeptical at times, the job you have done the last 2.5 years has really transformed Cardano Foundation, in my opinion. And as you said, you see now more and more community members actually applying for jobs at Cardano Foundation. That in itself is a quality stamp. And I really see this as part of Cardano Foundation now has the DNA of Cardano. You can tell that the people there, when the accounting team wants to have a course and implement it on the blockchain, you can tell it's part of the culture and the DNA. So I really love that answer, and I hope you viewers as well take some time, appreciate what Cardano Foundation is doing and where they are, and see if you can contribute as well. Anything you want to add, NIDO, to this before we move on?
Well, before you venture outside my into something that I know nothing about other than some toxicity on Twitter, it's because it's been a hot topic lately.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to touch on something that I recently found out when researching a little bit about the Cardano Foundation. Is if you can go and follow Cardano community on Twitter. They highlight, that's the CF managed account, then highlights community incentives and initiatives on Twitter. Like Newcast, they promote different community things. And go check out Cardano Spot. If you haven't heard about it, we can put that in the comment as well, I think. It's a social media network, community driven by Emergo. I haven't had the chance to check it out yet, but I'm gonna try it and see. But that's some end things from me.
That's a great plugin, and I believe you can also contribute with articles there as well. So it's a great open platform for contributing. And yes, you said it. We're now moving topic, so we're going to have a really an in-depth episode on governance for our next episode. But since you're here, Frederik, I'm curious about a few things on governance and how Cardano Foundation sees its role in governance, basically. I know this is quite a balancing act. For example, when you did voting on Catalyst, you wrote a long explanation on how much Cardano Foundation will vote and on what category Cardano Foundation will vote and such. I believe it was 14.5 million ADA. But now we are moving into a new era of governance with this SIP 1694. Can you reveal any, and I don't want you to commit on anything here, I just want to hear your thoughts. Can you say anything about the Cardano Foundation thought process on voting during this Voltaire governance era and during voting of the SIP 1694? How do you see the role of Cardano Foundation during this voting process?
That's a very good question, and it's a balancing act, right? So I think first of all you have to a lot of people don't appreciate what we have now and what we actually made happen in the last year, 2 years time, right? So I actually just wrote that down to a nation state the other day because they were very interested in the governance, because they're kind of evaluating whether Cardano could be a fit for the infrastructure, right? And I think the first thing we are having is the change management process of the protocol. That's what you and I today call the Cardano improvement proposals. And the Cardano Foundation actually changed the process last year to ensure that it was, if not up to, then at least better than what we see with the open source software today. And that meant that we actually separated the problem identification and prioritization with the solution. And what you then have today is you have first, you say, hey, this is a problem I'm trying to solve, and you have a discussion around, is it a real problem, and what is the priority of this problem, and then comes there some solution suggestions to that, right? And then there comes an acceptance, or say, yes, let's do something about this, right? The next thing you then have is solution is being built, or protocol parameter is being moved, or whatever that might be, right? And then there's a Q&A and a verification and a validation that this doesn't break Cardano and it does the right thing. So think about cybersecurity and those things. And now comes what's called a change request. So a change request, what it really does is that you have 3 different bespoke entities currently today, and multiple stakeholders which is not affiliated with each other in that setup, who has to sign off using digital signatures that this is actually happening. And this prepares what we call a hard fork combinator event or a protocol parameter change. Now what you then have is you have a multi-signature or multi-sig event taking place, and Cardano is 5 out of 7. Which is which basically means that now this code or this protocol parameter is being changed. And then you have the fourth step is what's called a right of refusal. For those who are very technical, you can look into the CIP47 around those things. But what it really means is that the stake pool operators actually have the ability to say, no, we do not agree with that. We are actually the runners of the protocol, and we do not agree in these changes. And this is what we have in place today. And I think this is already actually quite good. Now, there is some choke points and some things we would like to improve in that, and that's what you're speaking about now with CIP 1694, which is, in layman's terms, we think about it as a constitution. Because when you then change what we have in place today, there is a certain part of off-chain governance, and what you want to have is you want to have more on-chain governance. But how do you protect the blockchain from the intent of the blockchain? Meaning that if you suddenly have a hostile force of very large whales who says, we want to weaponize Cardano to do certain things, which was never the intent of the blockchain. So how do you protect that, and how do you evaluate that? And what would be the coolest thing, of course, would be able to write the constitution in a binary format, so there is no discussion on the interpretation. But this is probably more at an aspirational level, right? The other thing what you want to do is you need to legitimize the constitution, right? So you need to actually have a vote around that, and you need to think about thresholds in that, because is it sufficient that, let's say, 10% of the network votes? Is that representative, right? Or is it more representative 50% vote? And that's where it's coming back to why it's a little bit tricky with your question. Because on one hand, the Cardano Foundation, we do have quite a lot of ADA, and we're very public about that. So our addresses are public. So you can go in on the mainnet and you can find our balances and see how much we have, right? And we've been trying to be very transparent about how we use it, but also how we deploy it to stake pool operators and delegation and so forth. And I think what we don't want to get to is a situation that we can influence the vote with our ADA holdings. That's not what we see our role to be. But on the other hand, I don't think a good democracy allows us not to vote. I think that you need to participate in democracy, and you do that by showing your opinion, not just saying it, but actually voting. So I think what you will see from the Cardano Foundation, it would be that we will participate in the educational process. We will participate in the orchestration of the community to get to a really good CIP 1694. We will work hard to get that legitimized because we think it's a good way. We have a couple of things up our sleeve, which we're actually announcing internally with IOG today, but we would like to see, I can say it here, I think, we would like to see a stake pool operator vote. So we would like to see that, because you can actually do that on mainnet today and you don't need no tooling. So we would like to kind of get to a situation that the stake pool operators gets more comfortable, but not just voting, but also showing who they are when they vote, right? Because I think this is, there's a big difference between voting anonymously and then saying, my business, my stake pool, this is my view, right? So I think this is a part of the process of taking over and being a part of this delegated representatives, right? So it's going to be a balancing act from us in advocating, pushing, talking about what we want, but we will most likely, I'm like 99% sure, we will definitely not vote with all of our ADA, except if we see the whole community coming together and really voting, like 50-60% of all ADA is voting. And we see today that already 70% of all ADA is staked, so we're one of, that's really amazing, but we also have the best staking in the market. So when I look at it, because it has full liquidity, no lock-in, no slashing, right? But we don't have those kind of figures yet on voting in Catalyst, right? So it's going to be a balancing act, but we will most likely participate in the vote, but we will participate with a small amount, and we'll be very vocal about what our thoughts are on it, because I think that's what the community needs from us. We cannot just be a bystander and being passive on this. We actually need to talk about what our view is. And other places we will not take a view, right? So we don't take a view today on is project A better than project B, for instance. So we don't vote on that in Catalyst because we think that's a bit unfair in terms of showing our love. But we like to vote on themes like. So we like, music and art is a scene where we see it touches people's heart and soul and the interest for blockchain. So we like that. We like infrastructure, of course. We like tooling. We like tooling. Things that makes it easier to do magic on Cardano is things we like, right? So it's a difficult one, but I hope I gave you at least the intent of where we stand.
I really appreciate that answer, because there's going to be whales, be it Cardano Foundation, exchanges, persons with large holding, IOHK, all of the parts of ecosystem needs to participate, and it will be this gradual release to the rest of the community to have a say. So, of course, I think Cardano Foundation should have a say as well. But as you highlight, this has to be a balanced approach. You don't want to influence decisions where you as a Cardano Foundation have a neutral stance. And yeah, there's going to be many considerations on that going forward. But most important of all is that we have the tools, that we're able to see who voted what, that we have transparency, that we have ways to understand the direct representatives. So I agree with you when you said tooling. That's going to be important going forward. But from a general user's perspective, NIDO, like, what do you see is important for you to understand the governance project? We have mentioned like SIP, like Cardano improvement proposals. There's SIP1 that describes the whole process of Cardano improvements. But as a voter with perhaps not the time or the ability to read through all of this, like, what do you think is important for you to understand governance and to contribute in governance? Is that an okay question?
Yeah, it's the main part must be to understand what you're voting on, and good tooling to actually vote.
Yeah, and to be able to vote not just through a command line, but actually, for example, through your wallet or tools. Yeah.
We're touching on a press of a button earlier, and for voting and governance, it's push of a button.
I think that's going to be key to see a higher participation rate than what we saw in Catalyst, which is a great project, and I love it as well, but we need to have more participation rate. Last question, and I'm trying to not make it too tricky for you, but governance is something I'm really passionate about, Frederik. So membership-based organizations, it's part of the SIP. Do you see Cardano Foundation as having a role with like nurturing or establishing such membership organizations, or even having members of Cardano Foundation as part of such a organization to help bootstrap it? Do you have any thoughts about membership-based organizations?
I have a lot of thoughts about that, and we also contribute a lot about the, let's say, the content of that, at least from our view. But we do that mainly in the background, because it's important for us that the community sees also some alignment out there on this, and it's a tough thing to do. Last year, we actually suggested a membership-based organization around open source, sort of like a GitHub or code repository, and how to manage that. And there were some really clear lines about how that should be and how it shouldn't be, and we took some inspiration from some of the large open source projects today. And but I think the membership-based organization we kind of look at, as suggested by Charles now, is more about the off-chain part.
Yeah.
So the way I look at it, and by the way, I'm not sure that SIP 1694 holds anything about an MBO, except if they are just added that now. The way we look at it, last time I read it through last week, what it really is Voltaire is 3 buckets, and it's really, really important that people understand that, and there's interoperability and dependencies among those buckets. So the first bucket is the tooling and the on-chain tooling and voting. So this is basically what allows you to have DREPs and allows you to have, public voting on-chain. So not like Catalyst, which is sort of at best a side chain, right? But really on mainnet, and that's why I kind of like what we could do through the CLI today with stake pool operators, but only with stake pool operators. So that needs to be delivered, and that IOG is making really good advancements on that, and then Jared and Charles is doing all they can there to push that over the line. So that looks very promising. Then there's the SIP 1694, which is really about the constitution, which I spoke about before. And this is these safety parameters that when suddenly the network itself can take decisions, right, that you want to ensure that it doesn't stray too far away from the intent. So there need to be some safeguards, but the safeguards cannot hinder innovation. So we shouldn't get to a situation that we cannot get the features and the changes we need to ensure that the whole world can benefit of Cardano. And I think that's going to be very tricky. And that's what I said before, ideally speaking, having it in a binary format, so you don't need to interpretate on it, would be the best way of doing it. So that's the constitution of CIP 1694. And then the third leg is the MBO. And what I think the MBO is leaning more and more towards is a membership-based association which can do some of the off-chain governance. And there is going to be some off-chain governance. Let me be very clear about that. And it's, we might end up in a situation that in 10 years' time there's not, but we do not have the maturity in the general population, not just the Cardano population, the general population today. We don't have a model we can take and then merge that with technology, and then we have a situation that everything works splendid. So if you look at some of the most developed Western countries, right, they have a voter participation less than 50%. We see that politicians, professional, people who is, taking decisions on behalf of us, they sit in office for 4 years and you have, no accountability. You just have to hope and pray that they did what you asked them to do for 4 or 6 or 8 years, right? And the incentive structures are completely off, right? So in a certain way, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to change democracy. And as the old Greeks were saying, right, it's really bad democracy, but it's the best we could come up with, right? And I think in this case, it's a little bit the same. What we're going to see here is that the MBO would have different functions, such as off-chain governance, and so the ability for you to be a member and participate. And that would, some committees and technical committees own some GitHub repositories and stuff like that, which I think is crucial on the next evolution stage of Cardano. And yes, the Cardano Foundation will participate in that. In which format, we don't know yet, because we need to get clear about what the scope is. And you also need to understand that the Cardano Foundation, the intent was never that the Cardano Foundation should be there forever, right? And we should never build in such a way that you'll be becoming reliable on the Cardano Foundation forever. Mm-hmm. But the idea certainly is that the Cardano Foundation should be looking at the long time horizon. And as we are so lucky to get a salary from doing Cardano 24/7, I think an MBO without us participating, I cannot imagine that. So we will be there and we will be active around that, and we will take some liability of certain functions in there until the community can either bring it on chain or that somebody else comes and can find a business model to replace that.
I really like that answer, because all the accumulated experience that the three entities that's something that has to gradually go through the community. So it will be a process, and as you said, we don't want to reinvent the current wheel of democracy. We want to take the best parts and use the technology to improve it, and that's also going to have to be a gradual process. So I don't think this will be easy. But I think it will be a lot of fun, and I think it will be something that's so meaningful going forward. And I just love to see the passion, and I'm really glad that Cardano Foundation will be part of this journey. All right. I just want to thank you, Frederik, for taking the time to do this with us. I really appreciate it. As a small Scandinavian podcast and YouTube, we really appreciate that someone like you, the CEO of Cardano Foundation, takes his time off to come here. I hope it was a valuable time for you as well. And NIDO and myself, we're really thrilled to have you here today. So, yeah, anything you want to add to that, NIDO?
No, it's an honor to meet you. I've read a lot on Twitter, and I've been following all the criticism of the Cardano Foundation. But after I've started educating myself on what you guys actually do in the background, it's an honor to meet you, and I really appreciate what you do for our community.
Well, thank you, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the little CF Hearts logo you have on the wall in the back. That's definitely that's a good conversation breaker. Do make sure to send over the Cardano song you spoke about earlier. I believe I haven't heard that, so I would love to hear that. And I would love to come back to your channel in 3 to 6 months' time, or whatever fits you, and then we can pick up the conversation and say where we are. So no doubt about that. And if you need somebody from my team, like engineering or something like that, I'm sure we can get that orchestrated as well.
Amazing. Cool. Okay, let's end the episode there. We will be sure to drop some links with the things we have discussed. For example, the SIP, what it means, and stuff like that. So I hope you, the viewers, enjoy this. And if you have any questions and perhaps something about Cardano Foundation, be sure to send us those questions and we'll try to forward them. So yeah.